Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day 490. Friday, July the 12th, 2018. Fun Friday. Oh my goodness. Well, Thursday was pretty fun. If the Lisa Page closed door session was an open door session, now that would be a fun Friday. But we'll have to reflect back on Thursday if we want to find the real fun, because that's where it was all going down in the House Oversight and Judicial Committees when they were doing their open hearings with Peter's been stroking us. By now, I'm sure most of you have seen quite a bit of that footage, at least most of the good ones, the Republicans. Louis Gohmert certainly had a pretty good session with Peter's been stroking us. Goodlatte, Trey Gowdy, Jim Jordan, DeSantis, just quite a few of them raked him pretty good. But unfortunately, there was quite a few questions that were that I was hoping would be asked of Peter's been stroking us that they were not answered, were not asked. So they didn't ask some of the questions I would have asked. But let's just kind of go through the overview of this. First of all, what's kind of funny about this is normally when there's something pretty cool like that happening, we will bring up one of the computers in my office with a couple guys I work with, and we'll put on C-SPAN or whatever, and we'll just have it on while we're doing our paperwork or whatever. But what happened this morning is I got to work, and my boss had a special, thing he wanted us to do, special project. So I got caught up in this special project, which took us to lunchtime, and then after lunch. Basically came back after lunch and we had meetings for the rest of the day, and in fact didn't even get out till almost quarter till 7. So meetings all afternoon long. I never got to see any of it really. So anyway, on my way home on Thursday nights I stop by my mom's house and I take out her garbage. See, on Wednesday night I take out my trash. On Thursday night I take out mom's trash. So anyway, I stopped by my mom's to take out the trash, and as soon as I walk in the door, I just see the look on her face. I can tell she's really frustrated and pissed off. See the smoke coming out of her ears, her face is all red, and her eyes are about that big and round, and she's like, "Did you see those hearings?" And I'm like, "No, I was busy all day, meetings and working on other stuff. I never got to watch any of it, so how'd that go?" And she just went off. She was telling me all about it, so anyway, I knew it was going to be pretty bad. So anyway, I got home and got something to eat and watched quite a few videos, probably about 7 or 8 videos, the Republicans interviewing Strzok. So let's kind of go through basically what we learned from the Peter's been stroking us open hearing. Well, first of all, it was a 3-ring circus, because you literally had the Democrats literally acting as almost like his defense attorneys. And they even brought in a Peter's been stroking us cheering section. Unbelievable the way that was circused up. I'm surprised the Republicans allowed that to happen. But they kept calling for points of order and this and that and the other thing. I mean, it was a complete cluster foxtrot, and it was a mess. Really, it was a mess. It was almost laughable. The Democrats are just absolutely sickening. I mean, if they have no questions to ask, they should shut the hell up. The purpose of these types of hearings is not to do what they did, but we saw what they did today, and it was disgusting and disturbing all at the same time. It shows you what we're dealing with here, and it shows you who Peter's been stroking us friends are. But anyway, we got to sit there and watch Pistol Pete lie his ass off. Basically what he did was he lied when he did answer questions. He continues to try to make the argument that all those comments he made, thousands of derogatory comments about Trump, and even things that certainly sounded like action words, that all that was just nonsense. It was all just hyperbole and stuff like that, not to be taken seriously. Then he had a bunch of questions, real important questions, the ones that you really want to get the answers to, which he said he couldn't comment on because of part of an ongoing investigation. Well, if that's the case, if we can't get to the bottom of what happened here until we in the other investigation, which I assume he's talking about the Mueller investigation, well, hell, the Mueller investigation could go on for 15 years. Does that mean that we can't investigate anything else that might be somewhat associated because Uncle Bob has got his... Tell Uncle Bob to put his damn case on hold. And let's focus on the real case of what really happened in 2016 and who really influenced the 2016 elections. I think it was Peter's been stroking us, Lisa Page, Comey, McCabe, and all their friends who really tried to influence the 2016 election. So we had a three-ring circus. We had the Democrats running interference. Strzok wouldn't talk about anything prior to July 31st, 2016. Whenever they asked him about anything that might have occurred or gone on before July 31st, 2016, he just simply wouldn't answer the question. He'd either say, I don't know, or I can't answer, or whatever. He would not ever really answer any questions or comment on anything really that would have happened before July the 31st, 2016. And we all know why. We did get a couple bombshells from him. He did admit that he met multiple times with Bruce Orr. So now we have a much better idea of another direction that the dossier took to get into the hands of the FBI. Obviously, it went from Confusion GPS to Nellie Orr to her husband Bruce, and Bruce passed it on to FBI counterintelligence or the multi-agency task force or whatever you want to call it. So we now have a clearer idea of the chain, of that chain. Keep in mind, you had multiple chains. You had the Rotten Reverend Clinton's people moving it through the State Department. You had it going through this direction with Fusion GPS and Nellie Orr and Bruce Orr. You also had it coming directly from Steele, directly to the FBI, as well as going back to Fusion GPS and whatever directions it went from there. So, I mean, just absolutely incredible on some of these things that we learned today. But he did admit, there was, I forget who asked the question, but he did admit, he wouldn't get any specifics, but he did admit of talking with the people in the intelligence community. He wouldn't specifically say Brennan or Clapper or what agency. He wouldn't say. He was pressed on it, you know, when they said, well, CIA, and he wouldn't comment on the specific agency. He said that that he had conversations, had talked with people within the intelligence community surrounding the Trump-Russia investigation. But he wouldn't really specify the dates or times or anything like that. But he did admit that he was involved with the intelligence community, which is a problem because the intelligence community cannot be involved in domestic investigations. So that means he had to be talking about things happening overseas. And what would that have involved? And who would have been involved in that? So he really didn't give up information. He was exactly what I expected he would be, which is arrogant and smug and condescending, and again, just continues to make this case, tries to make this case, that all those things he said, those were just, you know, hyperbole and not to be taken seriously and had no impact on the investigation or what have you. Which we all know is bullshit. He's lying, and everybody knows he's lying. He's lying. We know he's lying. He knows we know he's lying. He's going down, though, my friends. Peter's been stroking us is not long for this world. He even denied that he was under investigation. Boy, I'll tell you what, this guy's arrogant. But anyway, it appears that he may be held in contempt for refusing to ask certain questions. And so I assume that we may see him back again. And if not, I mean, this guy should be brought in front of a grand jury. He should already have been indicted. I mean, the whole 9 yards. It's all coming out. Believe me. He didn't do himself any favors today. I don't know about how you guys feel, but I don't feel like he did very well. I mean, he did the best he could. I mean, let's face it. Based on his situation, I mean, I don't know if you could have done any better. I mean, he's a pretty good liar. You got to give him that. But I don't think he changed anybody's mind on either side, really. Okay, let's move on to something else just for a moment, and we'll get back to that. So we also had, on a lighter note, we have a CNN commentator today saying that Mad Maxine Waters is the most popular Democrat in the country. I guess she's more popular than Bernie now. Of course, he's not a Democrat. And that she could be the 2020 nominee. Mad Maxine Waters, the 2020 nominee. Now, the Rotten Reverend's not going to be very happy to hear that. So I imagine Mad Maxine could be involved in some scandals. Some dirt could be coming out on her. Compliments of the Rotten Reverend. You don't want to get in the way of the Rotten Reverend, Maxine. She'll mow you over. She'll run right over you. No problem. The whole thought of it, though, is ridiculous. Very ridiculous thought. Anyway, let's go on to the next thing, which is also slightly humorous. Of course, we have Saggy Daniels. That's right, Saggy Daniels was arrested in Ohio last night at a strip club for fondling an undercover female officer. Fondling an undercover female officer. Well, it appears, though, that her lawyer, of course, Mr. Avenatti, stepped in and found a nice loophole, and it appears that he may have gotten her out of it. The charges may have been dropped at this point. It looks like they may be, and I guess the excuse they're giving is that she was not made aware of the laws in the state of Ohio of how you can touch people. If you're a performer in a strip club in Ohio, you can't really touch the people in the audience, male or female. And apparently she was, I guess, doing some dirty dancing, and put her hands in the wrong way on a female in the audience who turned out to be an undercover officer who's investigating a prostitution and things like that. So anyway, Saggy arrested and then released. I guess the charges have been dropped, so I guess she's free and clear, and she'll be out there stripping somewhere tonight to probably 6 people. 4 of them the staff, because she's Saggy, and no one wants to see Saggy. Now, let's get back to Peter's been stroking us. Like I said, there was a lot of questions that I was hoping would be asked that were not asked. And it's a shame that these guys only get like 5 minutes, and it's a shame that they spent most of their time today having to stop and start, because every time they started to get somewhere, some Democrat would go point of order, and then stop the whole thing, and they get into a bickering, some arguing, and it was a clown show, and a lot of good questions were not asked. So, some of you are wondering what questions would I have asked had I been on that committee. So, I'm going to go through some questions that I would have asked. Peter's been stroking us. Peter's been stroking us, and he stroked us all day today, or yesterday, and it wasn't fun, but we're going to get him. So here it would be some of my questions for Peter's been stroking us. I would say, Mr. been stroking us, did the Rotten Reverend Clinton use a secret, non-government email account to conduct official State Department business? And if so, was that a violation of 18 U.S.C. 793E? Then I would say, Mr. Ben Strokinus, did the Rotten Reverend Clinton destroy or order others to destroy evidence that was under subpoena? If so, that would be a violation of 18 U.S.C. 1519. Mr. Ben Strokinus, did the Rotten Reverend Clinton, having lawful possession or control of information relating to national defense, permit through gross negligence the same to be removed from its proper place of custody? Did the Rotten Reverend Clinton, having lawful possession or control of information relating to the national defense, permitted through gross negligence the same to be removed from its proper place of custody? If so, that is the exact wording in the statute 18 U.S.C. 1519 of the Espionage Act. Mr. Ben Strokinus, what is the difference between extreme carelessness and gross negligence? Tell me, Peter, have you ever heard the term, or are you aware of the CIA's 6-agency task force or multi-agency task force? Have you ever heard the term, or are you aware of the CIA's 6-agency task force or the multi-agency task force? Mr. Ben Strokinus, did the Rotten Reverend Clinton knowingly alter, destroy, mutilate, conceal, with intent to impede, obstruct, or influence an investigation? Did the Rotten Reverend Clinton knowingly alter, destroy, mutilate, conceal, with intent to impede, obstruct, and influence an investigation? If so, that is also a violation of 18 U.S.C. 1519. Mr. Benstrokinus, the Rotten Reverend Clinton said she didn't know the C on classified documents meant classified. Is that correct? Do you believe, Mr. Benstrokinus, the Rotten Reverend Clinton, when she said that she didn't know what the C meant? Mr. Benstrokinus, did the Rotten Reverend Clinton lie to the FBI when she said that there was no classified information on her private server? Or did she tell you something different? Because she told America that there was no classified information on her private server. Said it multiple times. What did she tell the FBI, Pete? If she did tell the FBI that she did not have classified information on her private server, and James Comey made it perfectly clear that she did, then she lied. Or did she admit to it when you asked her? If so, she told the truth and essentially admitted to a crime. 18 U.S.C. 793F. In order to be prosecuted under the Espionage Act for mishandling classified information, is it required that the government prove intent? Mr. Benstrokinus, let me repeat that for you. That one requires a little thought. In order to be prosecuted under the Espionage Act for mishandling classified information, is it required that the government prove intent? Mr. Benstrokinus, who removed the classified markings from the Rotten Reverend Clinton's emails? Who removed the classified markings from the Rotten Reverend Clinton's emails? Mr. Benstrokinus, James Comey, your former boss, stated that the Rotten Reverend Clinton had on her private server 110 emails that were born classified, 65 emails that were deemed to be secret, and 22 that were deemed to be top secret SAP. Would this finding constitute a crime? Let me say that again, Pete. James Comey stated that the Rotten Reverend Clinton had on her private server 110 emails that were born classified, 65 emails deemed to be secret, and 22 deemed to be top secret SAP. Would these findings constitute a crime? Mr. Benstrokinus, did the Rotten Reverend Clinton use an unauthorized BlackBerry overseas after State Department security officials told her that she could not use that BlackBerry outside the U.S.? Did the Rotten Reverend Clinton use an unauthorized BlackBerry overseas after the State Department security officials told her that she could not use that BlackBerry outside the U.S.? Mr. Benstrokinus, how did the Rotten Reverend Clinton's emails, State Department personal emails from 2 different accounts, BlackBerry messages, how did all that end up on the laptop of Anthony's wiener? How did all those emails, State Department, 2 personal email accounts, her BlackBerry communications, how did all that information end up on the laptop of Anthony's wiener, good old Carlos Danger? How did they get there, Pete? And does the very fact that they were there show that the rotten Reverend Clinton meets the standard for violating the Espionage Act? Let's review the rotten Reverend Clinton's emails, State Department emails, 2 personal email accounts, and a BlackBerry, all found on the laptop of the Carlos Danger, Anthony's wiener. Let's look at that law one more time. 18 U.S.C. 1519. Having lawful possession or control of information relating to the national defense permitted through gross negligence, the same to be removed from its proper place of custody. It appears that she is guilty of all these crimes, Pete. Next question, Pete. If you say that bias wasn't the reason for the rotten Reverend Clinton not being charged with crimes despite the overwhelming evidence of her criminal violations, then why was she not charged with the crime? If there was no bias and you have all this evidence of crime, why wasn't she charged? What was the reason, Pete? Why don't you tell us? Tell all of us here in the chamber today, all those folks at home watching on C-SPAN, we'd like to know that if bias wasn't the reason that you let her off the hook and she committed all these crimes, which we've just gone through, then what was the reason you let her off the hook if it wasn't bias? I thought you'd like that one, Pete. Here's another good question, Mr. Benstrokinus. Were you aware of any spies in the Trump campaign before July the 31st of 2016? And was that December 28th, 2016 text where you asked Lisa Page about getting the approval on the Oconus lures, that being the foreign spies, connected to the investigation of Trump or anyone in his campaign? What was that all about? Were those spies that you were trying to get approval for to be used in the investigation of Trump or anyone in his campaign? And remember, this text occurred on December 28th of 2015. 2015. 9 months before you opened the counterintelligence operation. 9 months before you opened the counterintelligence operation, you were asking Lisa Page about getting approval for the Oconus lures, foreign informants. What was that all about, Pete? Mr. Benstrokinus, do you know Stefan Halper? Have you ever had a conversation with Stefan Halper? Have you had any communication with Stefan Halper? If so, please tell us as best you can the dates, approximate dates of when you had these communications and the method of communications. Personal conversation with him, email, texts, smoke signals, doesn't matter. What were your dealings with Mr. Halper, Pete? And how about Mr. Downer? Did you meet with Mr. Downer, Alexander Down the Hatch Downer, when you were over in London, Pete? And if so, was Mr. Downer acting in any capacity as an intelligence operative for the United States government, the FBI, the intelligence community, any associated groups, or any foreign government? How about Mr. Mifsud? Have you ever spoken with Mr. Mifsud? Had any communication with Mifsud? Was he working in any way that you know of as an informant, a spy, or anything like that during 2016? Was he working for the FBI, the CIA, some other agency? What do you know about Mr. Mifsud, Pete? And how about Mr. Greenberg? What do you know about Mr. Greenberg, Pete? Was he also working for the FBI, the CIA, the Multi-Agency Task Force, some foreign intelligence agency? Did you have any communications with him? Or are you aware of any communications or interactions between Mr. Greenberg and the FBI during the 2016 election surrounding the Trump-Russia investigation? Mr. Halper, Mr. Downer, Mr. Mifsud, and Mr. Greenberg. What do you know about him, Pete? So there would be the questions I would have asked Peter's been stroking us. Had I been on that panel asking questions? No, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have answered most of these. I would have gotten the same answer that many of these other people did. But there's quite a few of these questions that are closed investigations dealing with the Right Reverend Clinton, which in fact we know it wasn't really an investigation at all. There was never an official investigation, according to Huckleberry Horowitz, on the Right Reverend Clinton. No official investigation. But that's what I would have asked Peter's been stroking us. Now, the next question we have to ask is James Comey feeling queasy after watching Peter's been stroking us? Because there was something else. Excuse me. There was something else that Peter's been stroking us revealed today in those hearings that probably doesn't make the former dishonorable James Comey, the former director of the Federal Bureau of Insubordination, probably doesn't make him very happy. In the hearings today, Peter's been stroking us said that it was Comey who told him to prioritize the Trump-Russia probe over the Clinton email investigation, which wasn't actually an investigation. How do you think James Comey felt about that? Because you can bet he was watching those hearings today, probably glued to the TV. And Strzok basically threw him under the bus. When he was asked about that, he said, hey, the reason why I, quickly dropped off the Rotten Reverend Clinton investigation and the emails and jumped onto the Trump investigation, the Trump-Russia investigation, was because Comey told me to. He told me to prioritize it. Well, that comes into conflict with what we've heard from the dishonorable James Comey, the former director of the Federal Bureau of Insubordination. So, we will just have to wait and hear what Comey's response is to that. We'll have to wait and see if they hold Peter's been stroking us in contempt and if they call him back. And they should. Whether or not he'll agree to that, I don't know. But at some point, this guy is going to be in front of a grand jury where he's not going to be able to say, well, he can, but they'll fry him. This guy is eventually going to have to turn. I think this guy and McCabe will turn. I think Strzok and McCabe are going to be turned at some point once you start putting some actual pressure on them, which will not actually happen until we get either a presidential commission, a special counsel, or until the public puts so much pressure on that they're forced to do something. Now, maybe Mr. Huber is down there in Utah, doing all these things he's doing. Maybe, but that would require a lot of faith. Last time I checked, Mr. Huber works for the Department of Justice. I have no confidence in the Department of Justice to investigate itself. Maybe some of you do. Good. We need people like you on this channel. We need you people who are optimists, true believers, the faith-based group. We need you here. We need you here to counter the folks like me who question everything, who believe none of what they hear and half of what they see, and who know that the FBI and the DOJ never really do a very good job of investigating themselves. So it looks like Lisa Page will be She did cave. She got the message. She will be there tomorrow testifying in a closed session. We can expect she'll be called back in a couple weeks. After they get her answers, she'll be called back for a open hearing, just like we saw with Peter's been stroking us, and she'll probably do the same damn thing. That's all of them are going to do. I mean, they're all guilty as hell. What would you do if you were guilty as hell? Sit there and admit to all your crimes? No. You're going to do everything you can to avoid answering as many questions as you can, and the questions that you have to answer, because they don't have anything to do with an investigation, you're going to lie. What have you got to lose? Lying under oath to Congress doesn't carry near the penalty that the other crimes that she would have to admit to if she told the truth. Those crimes would be real crimes. It would carry real long jail terms. Felonies. Probably be in jail for the rest of her life. Yeah, if I have my choice between that or just simply getting smacked on the knuckles for lying to Congress, 30 days in jail or something, that's a no-brainer. And that's the gamble that Peter's been stroking us, Lisa Page, and every one of these people are going to play. They're never, ever, 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 ever going to admit to their crimes. You are going to have to actually get a real prosecutor with real investigators, get them real evidence, and you're going to have to go into a real court with the real grand jury, put them on the witness stand, and grill their ass, and bring up all the witnesses and all the other people you've been able to turn and build your case and prosecute them. They're not going to just walk up and admit to their crimes. It's not going to happen. You're going to have to actually work, investigate, and catch them. That's what you're going to have to do. So we'll see. Lisa Page, we'll see if we get any leaks out of her testimony tomorrow, but I don't expect we're going to learn very much. Expect the exact same thing from her that we got from Ben Strokinus, the same thing we got from McCabe. It's the same thing we got from Comey. It's the same thing we'll get from all the rest of these people. They're all involved up to their eyeballs, and the only thing that they can possibly try to do is to continue to say, hey, yeah, it sort of looks like it was politically motivated, but you've got to prove it, and we say it wasn't. So how do you prove that it was politically motivated? How do you prove that? Well, you don't necessarily have to. You just have to prove that a lot of the things that they did were illegal. They were violations of procedure and policy. Lying to the FISA court is one of them. Putting informants and launching surveillance without probable cause is another one. And these things all lead to abuse of power, obstruction of justice, destruction of documents, government records, where there could be 302s altered. We had many, many, many instances of illegal surveillance, unmasking hundreds of times, all this stuff going on. And the bigger crime that all these smaller crimes were a part of was the big frame-up. The attempt to use the power of law enforcement and intelligence agencies, the full force of the U.S. government to destroy a presidential candidate and then destroy his presidency, to get him impeached. And they're still working on it. That's what's so crazy about this thing. We're not talking about something that happened. We're talking about something that, yeah, it had happened, but it's still happening. So we'll see what we can learn about Lisa Page, and we'll find out if Peter's been stroking us, will be held in contempt, and what will follow as a result of that. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll look forward to reading your comments in the comment section to see what you guys thought about the hearings today. I'm sure there'll be some really juicy comments, so I look forward to reading them. You guys have a good Friday evening, and I'll see you back here on Saturday for the weekend edition, TowerGate. See ya.